Well, we have 3 regional waste management areas in Ireland, and each of those areas has its own waste management plan, and each area also has its own waste management regional office. Now, the waste management regional plans, they're virtually identical, and the 3 waste management regional offices actually work really close together on different campaigns and so on. And today I'm going to talk about the big national campaigns that the 3 regional offices work on together. And these campaigns are really, they're all behavioural change campaigns. They are directed at householders and communities. And I suppose this fits in very much with the discussion that's gone on about the societal side of circular economy, because these are designed to nudge society and nudge people towards the circular economy and towards more sustainable living. So the first project I'm going to talk about is a reuse project, and we do a number of reuse projects, but this is a really exciting one. It's designed to tackle the problem of single-use reusable coffee cups. It's our Conscious Cup campaign. I hope people have actually heard of this. It is basically a network of cafes and coffee shops all over Ireland. It's a very big network. We now have 800 coffee shops and cafes involved. And all of these coffee shops, they offer a reward to people who use a reusable cup, basically. It's a very, very simple idea, but it's really, really effective. And I have a little film here about how Roscommon County Council and the local Tidy Towns committees in Roscommon went about building their network, and this has been replicated throughout the country. So this is just an example of how it happened in one area, but it has happened in lots of different areas. Okay, and the way this campaign works is that all the coffee shops have that little logo that you saw in the film there, the orange and brown logo. They have that as a transparent logo inside their windows so that consumers can see that they will accept a reusable cup and that they will get a reward if they use their reusable cup. And the campaign itself also has a website, and on that website there's an interactive map which marks the location of every coffee shop that's involved in the campaign. And I think an indication of how successful this has been is that when we started this campaign at the beginning, we contacted all the big coffee guys, the big chain coffee guys, and asked them would they be involved, and they weren't really interested. But in the last few weeks, they have become on board and they contacted us, and actually in the last 2 weeks, Starbucks have become involved, and we're delighted to have them in the campaign. But I think that's also indicative of how important consumer power is, and that because their customers were pushing them towards this, because we had a lot of success on social media with this campaign, that eventually they were sort of forced into a situation where they had to come on board because it was the new cool thing. Okay, the next project I'm going to talk about is our Recycling List Ireland. Now hopefully you've seen this because it's been everywhere. It's been driving around on buses, and it's been in train stations, it's been in shopping centres. We also had a takeover of websites, not hacking them, just kind of, advertisements on the borders. And really this was a response to the level of contamination that we were finding in green bins in Ireland. We've had the green bin in Ireland about 15 years now. The level of contamination was up to about 30%. The waste companies were finding this very, very difficult to actually, sell the recyclables as products because they were so badly contaminated. On top of this, we have the situation where, of course, China has now closed its doors to anything but the purest material. We have this big national advertising campaign to try and counteract that. So I'm going to play yet another little film here for you. And this is an animation that we developed for this advertising campaign. So you can see the style we used and really how simple the messaging is with this.
Your new household recycling list. It simply comprises of paper and cardboard, rigid plastics, and cans and cans. Just make sure they are clean, dry, and placed loosely in the bin. For the full list of what goes in your household recycling bin, visit recyclinglistireland.ie.
Okay. So I think one of the things that was causing a lot of this contamination is that people were just genuinely confused about what they could put and what they couldn't put into their bins. And I had another point there, it's just gone out of my head, but anyway. So this really helps because it's very clear, and as you can see, the messaging is really, really simple. So basically, there's just 3 things that can go in your recyclable bin: paper and card, plastics, or aluminium cans, and that these have to be presented in a clean, dry, and loose way. So that's it. So the third project I want to talk to you about actually runs in parallel with the recycling list, and it complements it. So if the recycling list is a national advertising campaign, this next campaign actually works on the ground with communities, and it's very hands-on. And this is the Recycling Ambassadors Programme. And it's a great programme. It is funded by the department. It's managed by the 3 regional waste offices, and it's been run by Voice, the NGO. And the idea is that we have 30 recycling ambassadors throughout the country. You can see some of them here in their nice green outfits. And they deliver workshops. It's about a 20-minute workshop, and they deliver those to community groups, sports groups, residents associations, workplaces, and general groups like that. And the idea is, again, the messaging is very simple. They're showing people exactly how to recycle, what goes in the bin, what doesn't go in the bin. And the main message is, if it's not on this list, and here's the list. If it's not on this list, it doesn't go in the bin. And then every participant of the workshop gets this list. This is a magnet. They get this to put on their fridge afterwards, just to remind them. And you can see from this list here that it exactly mirrors the recycling list. So that's just the 3 projects that we're going to talk about today. And as you can see, the idea is really to nudge people towards the circular economy. Now, you probably noticed I haven't even really mentioned the circular economy in any of these campaigns, but that's because we want to keep the messaging really simple. And in a way, behavioural change, it's about nudging people slowly towards acting in a particular way. And what we're really aiming for is consistent, engaging communication to really nudge people into a more sustainable way of living. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks to Sarah and the team here at the Rediscovery Centre for the invitation to speak. And apologies if my voice gives out. As of yesterday, I couldn't even talk. So, Sarah, I didn't worry you with that, but I was self-medicating to try and be here today. So today we're here to talk about the circular economy, and I suppose I'm putting probably a slightly different focus on it, which is about, well, how does the larger business get involved, and how can we support business development? So I think it's great when we talk about the circular economy, and I've come through SAI and I've worked on campaigns around behavioural change, and which is terrific, and I'm coming at it now from a slightly different approach, which is, well, we have a business or we have an idea, so how can we help that business grow and develop and contribute back into the economy in another way? And the title of the presentation, and it's there purposely, it's how do we make sustainability the bottom line? Because when you're in kind of company parlance now, everyone is talking about the triple bottom line, which is environmental, social and financial. And actually that conversation has moved on because it's now environmental, social, financial and governance. So the new buzzword around town is ESG. So that's how companies are being evaluated, and that's even how startups, if they want to integrate a new product and service and sell it into the corporate world, they are responding to that ESG principle. So a little bit about Sustainable Nation. For those of you who don't know us, we are a not-for-profit. I think Anna covered a lot of it in her presentation. And we came together after the formation of the Greenway, or the merger of the Greenway and the Green IFSC. And we have a role in policy, and the abbreviation of IFS is the International Financial Services Strategy Policy. And that's actually really important because since 2015 and under COP21, the financial community have been mandated to step up and actually respond to climate change and actually fund climate action. So the Irish government and the Department of Finance have actually responded to that, and now we have a role within the International Financial Services Strategy. And as of this year, green and sustainable finance is a number 2 priority within the International Financial Services Strategy. And that's really important in terms of how are we beginning to mobilise investment into infrastructure and innovation, because we can do all of the work we want to do at a local level in terms of supporting business development, but unless the larger funds and fund managers are actually funding the large projects, we're not going to have that pull attraction or that drive or demand for products and services. So we really need to get the larger financial institutions more aware of what they can invest in and make the proposition as good as we possibly can for them. We are a network, okay. We are a network, so like any network, we connect, we support and we promote. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but the way we work is we work under 2 pillars. So my colleague Laura looks after sustainable finance. So that's where we're, on one hand, we're internationally promoting what Ireland does in terms of sustainable and green finance. And then domestically, we're working with a lot of the investors to say, this is what environmental, social and governance means. Here's how you need to start integrating it into your investments. And we're getting a lot of really good traction from the private financial or the capital markets. On the flip side, then I do all of the work on sustainable business, and we have lots of activities and lots of programs, and pretty much because we think it is a huge opportunity. And we can only do this in working in partnership with people. So 2 of our key partnerships, one is with Climate Kick. So Climate Kick is Europe's climate innovation initiative, and it invests about 80 million per annum in climate innovation and climate action in Europe. And we run the Irish office for them here. One of our other local partners is Trinity College, and we're looking to grow that partnership and develop more climate innovation here in Ireland. The other key one for everyone to know, because it is a resource, is Sustainability SkillNet. So there are 67 SkillNet or training networks around Ireland. We are just one of them. So through that, we can provide grant support back into private sector organisations to help develop the capacity of your workforce. I'm not going to go into the Climate Kick, but I'm sure the slides will be circulated. So I've put this one up here for your own, to read in your own time. But Climate Kick is very it's pan-European, but it looks at 4 thematic areas that it feels it can have an impact on. So it's about sustainable production systems, sustainable land use, sustainable city systems or urban transition. And then the one that's really interesting is decision metrics and finance. So how through data, through modelling and through financial systems can we begin to take more action? When Sarah asked me to do this, she said, Aideen, mention the Renew project. So Sarah and I worked on an Interreg project some years ago called Renew, which was about resource innovation network for European waste. And that was, again, a pan-European project. But it was interesting in the context that this was 2012, 2013 when that project actually started. And at that time, they were doing, I guess, lots of experimental work to figure out, well, what were the next waste streams that actually could be commercialised. And a lot of that work, whether it's in Belgium or whether it's Ireland, has now kind of helped seed some of the commercialisation activities that are beginning to happen. Why do we believe this is an opportunity? So whether we're talking about the circular economy, the bioeconomy, or clean tech, or climate aligned, they can all be kind of put together and bundled together into one big macro opportunity, which is right. Globally, 90 trillion has to be invested if we want to get to that low carbon economy. So all of the different facets of circular, bio, they all feed into that number in some shape or form. And now we can pull those numbers apart in many ways. But ultimately, that's a lot of money to be invested. That money, an Irish enterprise can have a piece of that opportunity. And if we look domestically, Ireland at minimum has to invest 40 billion for its own decarbonisation. And that's even before we add on adaptation or any of the other actions that have to take place. So domestically, there is a lot of opportunities for Irish business. And I would say Irish business, but also new business models and new ways of thinking. This isn't about the old kind of world of let's just be all for profit. I think we have to educate people that there are new ways to deliver business and services for citizens and for other industry out there. So what I do want to get into is a little bit about the activities that we do on the business side. So we've put all of our, I suppose, business support programs in what I call a 2-degree platform. And I just see that we need to create a pipeline of innovators and entrepreneurs in Ireland that are actively involved in climate aligned innovation, in circular economy innovation, and we're there to provide business supports to help them to do that. We are in a very niche area, so we don't step in to an Enterprise Ireland type role, but we actually do provide some of similar enough type activities. But EI quite like what we do because we are quite niche in what we do. So we provide training, we provide mentoring, we provide coaching, we provide access to funding, but more importantly, we are very thematic focused. And because we're so thematic focused, we can link a lot of the entrepreneurs to the people they need to talk to if they want to develop their business. And that's hugely important. And we've had, in numbers, we've had about 88 companies pass through some of our programs. That's equivalent to about 131 employees. We've provided, by the end of this year, we'd have provided grants of the order of 584,000. We've had about 240 people participate in our Climathon activities, and this year for the first time we'll be running our greenhouse programme. So those numbers need to grow, but those numbers sit in the context of a much larger kind of framework. So when we consider clean tech or climate aligned, countries like Denmark and Finland, they are getting a net contribution to their economy of about 25 billion per annum. And that's across the whole spectrum of consulting firms and what I would describe as pure play companies. In Ireland, we've identified as about 370 pure play companies, so companies who are actively developing a good or service for sale that's climate aligned or clean tech. And the slide, or that little graph on the right hand side, is just giving you a range of the services that they offer, and that's how they are beginning to define themselves. They're not defining themselves essentially as climate aligned or clean tech, but they're describing themselves as a company that's providing a service, whether it is energy, to support energy efficiency, to support renewable energy generation, to support resource efficiency. And we are seeing more and more companies emerge in this space. As of last year, we identified that there was a 13% increase in those numbers. And like doing some calculations, there's about 4,000 employees employed across those 370 companies. Now, these are all at an SME level. So we're not talking here, I haven't put in like a large Intel that's doing stuff on smart cities in here. So it's purely an SME number. And there's about, on average, 70% of those companies export. And that's actually really important for Ireland if we want to be positioned and known as a knowledge centre for climate aligned or the circular economy, is what are we exporting in terms of our knowledge and intellect and our the services that we offer. So to go into some of the programs in detail, so Climate Launchpad is our pre-Accelerator program. It's currently open for 2018 applications, so anyone who's interested. But I want to give you a sense of 3 of the companies that won the Irish final last year. And to begin with, all of the companies who apply, they go through a 2-day boot camp that's run by one of our European partners. And then they're put through a training program that's about 6 training sessions. They go through a national final, we select 3 teams, and those 3 teams then represent Ireland at a European final. So for the last number of years, we've sent teams to Amsterdam, to Tallinn, and last year to Cyprus, and this year the final is going to be in Edinburgh, so it's going to be nice and close to home. But essentially, we have the ability to send 3 teams each year to represent Ireland. And last year, we selected 3 teams, or that the evaluation panel selected 3 teams to go to Cyprus. The first team there is called Size U. So Size U is really interesting, and what they've developed is essentially a onesie that has kind of ink that can take your body measurements, and that onesie then is used in the fashion industry to take accurate body measurements. So if you're doing a made-to-measure or you're trying to do a kind of a clothesline, that you are A, reducing the fabric requirement, but B, you're also reducing the need for logistics. Because if you're in the made-to-measure, you're actually expecting a lot of people to travel in and out continuously for fittings. But even they're trying to look at applications then beyond that. How can it serve the fashion industry and more the mass market area, which again has a huge logistics element to it. So they're doing something that hasn't been done before in terms of the design and the IP behind the fabric and the system that they're using. New Wardrobe is another fantastic company run by Aisling, and it is what would you say, like a clothes swap website, but it comes with certain rules for how you can share your clothes, and it comes with very high standards as to how you can do that. Aisling's initial market has been in the university sector, and she's now scaling this to London. She won an award in London quite recently through a climate innovation event, and she's now scaling her business to London, and absolutely fantastic. And it actually is quite an interesting company because there is a mindset issue with New Wardrobe. So if you're a millennial, you will jump on board using kind of clothes share really easily. If you're not a millennial, you actually have to really think about it because it is a complete change of mindset. So I think when we're talking about new business and business models and business development, it is actually really interesting to know, well, who is your audience and who's going to buy this from you? And that was something that we discovered as we were going through the training program with Aisling and New Wardrobe. The last company that won, or the third company that won last year was called Aquaroot. And Aquaroot has developed a 3D printed biopolymer system that can be used in the horticultural industry. So instead of having to lay out extensive pipe networks that are pretty permanent, Vincent has figured out, well, how do you kind of print a pipe network that you can print from in a backpack equivalent that can support the delivery of water and nutrients as a grow system. And again, that's really exciting because he's looking at using materials that are paper-based, essentially, and looking to apply them in a different way. So there's lots of ways, and even from the concept of what he's using, there's also what he's now beginning to do is work with clients who are looking at this going, hey, there's a huge efficiency element here that if we can kind of crack this, we actually can make our operations about 40% more efficient. So when we're talking about all of these products, they are at an idea stage, and let's face it, these are still at an early stage of development. So they're beginning to work with companies and corporates who are helping them shape their products and take it to the next level. And that's what we're bringing them. We're making introductions for them to give to people who will advise them and say, this is what you need to do if you want to take this further. The Accelerator. So last year was our first year to run the Accelerator. And we put 8 companies through a very structured training program. But there are 2 companies that I want to single out. Before I do that, the Accelerator is a 3-stage program. And the first stage, at all stages, they get training and mentoring, but it is a competitive process. If you want to go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, you go through an interview, you have to meet certain criteria. Stage 1, you get up to a €10,000 non-equity grant. Stage 3, a €20,000 grant. Stage 2, a €20,000 grant. Stage 3, a €30,000 grant. But it is very competitive. And as of last Friday, we just closed all of our interviews for our new 2018 intake, and it's pretty exciting, the sort of companies that are coming forward. 2 very relevant companies that were part of last year's cohort. One is Memergy. So this is a company that's based in Longford. And Niall has figured out, well, how do you get a car tyre, which is generally, at this point, there are many ways you can dispose of it, but incineration will probably be the mass market way of disposing of car tyres. So he's figured out, well, how do you take that car tyre and how through I wouldn't say it's exactly one step, but a linear process. How do you break it down into its component parts of metal, oil, and carbon black? And carbon black is hugely interesting because carbon black is what makes black in all of these materials, and it's a really high value product. So he's been working, and through Climate Kick, he's received all the coaching and mentoring and support, but equally he received a technology validation voucher, and he's been able to work with Ramesh in Trinity, who's helped him figure out, well, how do you get the value? How do you kind of increase the value out of the carbon black? So that's incredibly exciting. He's just received a very substantial investment last year, and he's now looking to scale up. So when we're talking about the wider circular economy, I think this is a perfect example of how we can describe it. The next example is Hexafly. So many of you might have heard Alvin Hunt, who's the CEO and one of the co-founders. They've essentially figured out, well, there is a huge problem in the aquaculture industry. There isn't enough food to meet the demand of fish farming. And, how do we solve that? So they've figured, well, hey, there's the black soldier fly, and they've figured out a way, well, how do you break that black soldier fly? How do you breed it and then break it down into 4 component parts? And those 4 component parts have a very high value. So the first one is it's an insect oil, which is like an equivalent grade to coconut oil. It's a protein that can be used for a feed additive. There's also an element called frass, which is potential use as a natural fertilizer. And then the final one is they're still trying to figure out, well, exactly how can it be used, because there's applications in the pharmaceutical industry because it is a biopolymer. So that's from one fly. That's the byproducts from one black soldier fly. So they're looking to scale that up. So they have their plant in Meath. They're looking to scale that facility up, and they're in talks with lots of developers around the world who want to buy this product from them now and want it in fairly significant quantities. So this is, again, another fantastic example of the sort of companies that are beginning to emerge in Ireland. And what's really interesting about the two case studies, Memergy and Hexafly, they're both incredibly young. Like, this is their first business idea. So it just gives you a lot of hope that, the future is really bright for Irish enterprise in this space. I'm not going to go into this program in detail. This is our program that helps companies scale. So somebody who's been around for maybe 3-4 years, and they need to figure out, well, how do we take our business to the next level? We have a leadership development program. And again, for a lot of these programs, it is about creating the access points for the companies because they do not know who to talk to. So we're facilitating that for a lot of them. They were the companies in our first cohort, and many of them have gone on to do really well. Elm Solutions that we have there has rebranded and relaunched in the US market as Clear, K-L-I-R. So they're doing incredibly well. You have Hybrid is just going from strength to strength in emerging economies, emerging markets power, strength to strength in a lot of the African countries in terms of micro scale solar and wind, which is really important that we're not talking about large installations. And I'm missing, and Hub Controller is again another interesting company. And at the end of last year, they won the Global Clean Tech Cluster Award Silver Prize through our nomination, which is really important. And actually, that's one of the things that we do for any of the companies that participate with us and continue to work with us. Is that we try to see how we can promote them and nominate them on an international, domestic and international stage. Leave you with this one, 40 for 30. This is our business leaders network for folks who are involved in a sustainability role in larger corporates. So we've lots of really interesting companies involved there, but really it's about building the leadership capacity of those future leaders of the companies, because ultimately we want to position that somebody who's probably in a head of sustainability type role now, there is no reason why they shouldn't be in a CEO type position. So you're trying to build their capacity and have them be the voice for business in Ireland. Year of Sustainable Business. We're part of the National Mitigation Plan, and we're in there to deliver the Year of Sustainable Business 2018. So, after this, come and talk to me, and if you have any activities happening this year, we're happy to factor them in to our 2018 plans. But why it's really important is we are the only non-governmental body, to my knowledge, mentioned in the National Mitigation Plan. But it's giving us a platform to initiate and have a dialogue on businesses' behalf with the Department of Climate Action, which is really, really interesting. End of this year, we're going to be hosting the Climate Innovation Summit 2018. This is Climate Kick's flagship initiative. So that's going to be on to the 6th to the 8th of November in Dublin Castle. So you'll see more about that as the year progresses. And that's it from me. So thank you.
Hi folks, I'm just going to ramble around a few bits and pieces. Mostly I suppose I'm hoping that it might just sort of spark a few thoughts, spark a few discussions as we finish out the morning. The first couple of slides I was just going to indulge myself. The first one is to say congratulations to Sarah and the team. That's a picture I took. I was rooting back through my phone. I kind of figured I must have pictures of this somewhere. So that was April 2015 when we first walked into this building, or at least I first walked in as part of the advisory group that were kind of assisting the work of Sarah and her team on getting this building off the ground. And that's what they set off into, a building. One of the things that was really interesting, a challenge for the architects, the building had been specifically designed to lose heat. It had 4 big boilers. The idea was that it would get very hot in here and that the thing needed to dump heat. And obviously as a building that we were now going to see repurposed, it was going to have to retain heat. So the changes that were done in this building were just incredibly complex and really nicely executed. And you can see one or two of the bits of steelwork are still recognisable here. So it underlines the fact that everywhere we went and everywhere that this project was taken forward, the effort was constantly to reuse what we did, or to reuse the materials that were available within the building itself. So I suppose that was just the first thing, just to say that delighted the EPA is delighted to be part of this project, delighted to have been along the way so far, and we look forward to working together into the future. And that's some of, I suppose, what I'll just talk about maybe in the second one. We have worked and will work a lot with the Rediscovery Centre. Repaint is a nice piece of work, looking at, you know, reusing almost full cans of paint that we end up buying. Can you start to find a new life for those? So absolutely on message with the circular economy. Can you start blending paint to make new full cans of paint and sell it on? And the local authorities have been involved in it, and there's a fridge down the back there holding gently cooled paint if anybody wants to buy some. But we've been very excited by this model, and it's been good for us to be involved with it. On the kind of the research side, the likes of this good practice guide, Sarah was the lead author on it, so that's been important as part of, you know, trying to plot out and contribute to the debate on where we're going to go on reuse as a country and trying to make it happen. We've had some sponsorship arrangements. There's some of the stuff that's in the building we've been proud to sponsor, and there's a van outside somewhere there with that came from us. Nice, again, keeping things in use longer. It kind of come out of surface for the EPA, but we were able to provide it to the Rediscovery Centre. So, you know, the work that happens here just keeps banging back into the circular economy all the time, and we use it then, you know, for workshops. We use it as a venue. The photo there was a workshop that myself and Simon were involved with, that was held down below here. So whenever we can, we're pretty excited to come to this venue and be able to show it off to visitors if we can. So that's an important part of keeping this building sustainable. And the last part, I suppose, which is important for us is, you know, I said I'm on an advisory committee for the organisation, but equally, you know, we're drawing a lot of advice and guidance back from Sarah and her team as well. So I think that's been an important part for us in this, or in the Rediscovery Centre, is the kind of the two-way relationship. So that's kind of my little piece on the Rediscovery Centre. If we look at the circular economy itself, you know, I'm not looking to kind of start into definitions. I like that little diagram just down at the bottom right. It seems pretty clear and helps people understand that it's about a circular and things come in and things go out and such like. But mostly the point I suppose I'm trying to make is that there's an awful lot of things out there. It doesn't take very long to find lots of documents and lots of diagrams and lots of everything. That sort of people are trying to explain what the circular economy is, and I'm just growing more worried that the circular economy is just becoming a series of bits of paper and reports and diagrams and things like that. And maybe it's going to pass us by. And that's, I suppose, what's worrying me a little bit. Is this something that happens? And I speak about it in the EPA, and somebody speaks about it in Brussels. But if you're running a small business in Tullamore, does the circular economy mean anything to you or not? And that's really, I suppose, where I just want to get us thinking about this morning in the next few minutes. Like there is a certain area that will definitely hit. You know, there are legislative levers, and Jean Clark is here from the Department of the Environment somewhere, I think. There you are, Jean. So Jean just gave me these. You know, the Department of Environment are heavily involved in the negotiations on the legislation that will come in around the circular economy. And if you read nothing else, the bottom line is useful. So it's just to flag up the likes of new waste targets, which will be binding, and work on producer responsibility obligations. You know, these are going to be big issues for Ireland. They will make things happen. They will force pace. So something's going to happen because of the circular economy work that's going on, led by Brussels, and it will affect businesses and it will affect how we live in Ireland, and it will do that because of these bits of legislation. But I kind of just have this thought and feeling that there must be more to it than that. It can't simply be that our responses to the circular economy is just about because some laws have been passed and therefore we have to do things differently because there's a big legislative hammer that's hitting us. And it's that side of it, I think, is that we need to work on. You know, you could nearly say, you know, Jean's working hard on this stuff, it's going to come through and it's going to be binding. So it's the other side, what you might call the soft stuff, or more accurately represented as the even harder than the hard side and stuff, is that, you know, trying to get the hearts and minds won over. And you know, the other point I suppose that's just interesting is a lot of it is in place already. So these are bits and pieces of policy, you know, and I'm not saying this is a definitive list, but the top one is Ireland's National Waste Prevention Programme. It's something that comes under my responsibilities in the EPA. The next one is the new sort of big plan that was launched recently by government. There's a very explicit section on sustainable management of water and other environmental resources, and there's also a piece on a transition to low carbon economy. So within this big plan for Ireland, it's right in there that the circular economy makes sense. Things like corporate social responsibility, again, you know, that comment came up earlier about it, you know, does it always have to be about finance? And, you know, within the circular economy, or within corporate social responsibility ambitions, the circular economy fits in there too. The strategy statement of the bioeconomy, which only came out in the last few weeks, was mentioned, and again, it feeds into it. The action plan for jobs, which was launched, I think it was 2012-ish, I think, but it gets updated. The last one was out last year, 2017. And again, if we're talking about this as an economy and jobs appearing in it, this must be relevant to all of these sort of things. So when we're trying to move beyond the legislative shove that we're going to get. I think we've lots of pieces in place. There's lots of things that can happen, and I suppose it's just really about trying to see where we can go from there. Then, so this was me kind of trying to think about perceptions. The top line is, and I've put it in quotes just to be a little provocative. That's from McKinsey, I think it is. But there's any number of these numbers out there, and they're all very impressive. That was 0.6 trillion. I think that's 600 billion. I converted it. Trillion was a great word. I don't get to use it terribly often. And I just worry that maybe that doesn't mean a whole lot to a whole lot of people. And again, if you're wondering, could you set up a company in Longford looking at waste tyres, where does this speak to you that 600 billion per year will be generated in the economy? I'm worried that some of the messaging just doesn't really push back down to where the economy really happens. On the benefit side, we can say that it's good for transition to low carbon economy. It's all about material supply and security. So we're not trying to get little niche bits and pieces out of guys in China that don't want to sell them to us. We've heard about jobs. We're conscious that waste management can be improved by all of the things that are going on in here. On the opportunity side, we can new businesses. I'm just saying there, if there's recovery materials, maybe there's business opportunities there. Local supply chains. We talked about this. So there's lots of good things happening. But it came up already this morning. It's the bottom line there. Are our people seeing this thing as a threat? And that's kind of interesting, So how are people perceiving the circular economy? We're coming out from the top with all these things, and McKinsey are telling you it's worth 0.6 trillion. But maybe if you're in business in Ireland, are thinking of getting into business, or you're a consumer like me reacting and working with businesses, maybe the circular economy either means nothing, or maybe it's seen as something that I'm a little bit afraid of. So I think that perception is interesting, and I think I'm not saying what the answer is, I'm just thinking it's interesting for us all to toss that around inside our heads and see how we feel the circular economy is going to pan out, I guess. And this is some of the panning out then, I guess, and some of these numbers have come up already. There's a RAC report, there's two different numbers in it. There's 5,500 jobs and 13,000 jobs. But this is the idea, if the circular economy came into Northern Ireland, it'd be 13,000 jobs. That's getting interesting. That's starting to speak to me a little bit more than the 0.6 trillion that McKinsey told me about. It's like, oh, I could get one of those jobs. I live in Northern Ireland, I could do that, great. Our Zero Waste Scotland, and again, they have very similar statements put out already, or more recently they've put out this Circular Economy Investment Fund. Again, Jean mentioned it, I know Ian is here as well. But, so these are people that are, they're stepping up, kind of saying, well, the circular economy is a real thing. And I think that's a challenge for us. So again, I've just stuck it in yellow at the bottom. It's about the actual opportunities. And for me, some of those are going to be multinationals doing smart things smarter, a bit like what Jim spoke of earlier about just doing good business better. And some of it will go all the way back down to community enterprises, where maybe there's one or two people in Portlaoise going to start doing something because the circular economy has somehow prompted a business opportunity. But it's critical for us, for me and the EPA, for the people who've spoken, for you guys listening, to try and think where they are and how do we activate these things. And I think that's a real challenge. I'm just going to take a few slides to talk a little bit about what the EPA and the circular economy fits in, and then I'll wrap up. So waste prevention, now these are not really in any particular order, but I did put myself at the top. Waste prevention is where we work on, so we do lots of things there, and I'll give a few examples, but there's lots and lots of bits and pieces that we do that are relevant to the circular economy, and be happy to talk offline if anyone wanted to learn a little more. But things like research, we look at chemicals legislation and how to get working towards a non-toxic environment, managing hazardous waste. They're all sort of related to the circular economy. Our regulation obviously is a huge piece of work that we do, and again we've within our licensing there's a push for continual improvement and a continual move towards efficiency. So that's a big lever we have. Through regulation we have end of waste and byproduct declaration responsibilities, producer responsibility. Again, that's something that I work with. And waste tyres, you mentioned earlier, there's a new tyres scheme coming into place. Tyres are going to be collected properly for the first time in a long time, and so then you're starting to wonder, is there a circular economy opportunity that for the likes of these guys in Longford, that if we're finally collecting the tyres and now we have to deal with them responsibly, now we need an outlet to do it. So you can see how these things do all fit together, and statistics and advocacy then, it's all about what we can do to inform the debate and to lead the debate, and they're the sort of things that I suppose that we can be doing. So we feel that we have a big role to play in the circular economy, but we're just trying to see how we fit in with a bigger system, I suppose, and bigger ideas that are out there. Michelle Green is down there somewhere as well. The Smile Resource Exchange is an industrial symbiosis project we look after, or at least we fund it. They run it. There's some data from fairly recently, but it's really just about keeping materials in use, and one man's byproducts from his from his industry might go into another factory as the raw materials into them. So some of the similar things are maybe if one factory is taking in raw materials in boxes and someone else needs boxes to send out their product, maybe one guy doesn't have to try out the boxes and someone else doesn't need to buy boxes. Maybe we could transfer these. More interestingly, there's a nice piece of work they're doing with a factory that was powder coating paint, and to a very high quality. I think it was automotive manufacturing, absolutely top quality. But the waste paint was getting discarded, but they found someone nearby who was painting farm gates. He needed paint, he didn't need it to be top quality. So they were able to, so instead of having seen a waste stream come out of one factory and someone else having to purchase in, you could see that there was a synergy there. So this is the sort of stuff the Smile Exchange do. They've been doing it for a number of years now, and this is absolute circular economy stuff in action. And it's just, it's interesting for us in Ireland to recognise this stuff is happening and it's there. This is our large water users community of practice, and again the slides will be shared, but there's about 120 members. These are some of the biggest companies in Ireland, the Boston Scientifics and the Anglo-Irish beef processors and these kind of guys. They're all using something like about 100,000 cubic metres of water a year, so they're lashing through water. And this is a peer-to-peer network where they meet a couple of times a year and just talk about, how do you conserve water? Has anybody tried this technology? I was at a meeting recently and someone asked about a particular application of reverse osmosis. Had anyone in the room done it? And there was a bit of a pause, and one guy stuck his hand up and he said, well, we've looked into it, we did a full due diligence, but we didn't go down that route, but I'll share everything we learned about it with you. So it's a really good peer-to-peer network, and again it's about trying to minimise the use and disposal of water back down to drains, and to keep it in circulation or keep it conserved as long as possible. The last one I'll just mention is some work that we're doing through Anne Murphy with IBEC. Anne has been tasked as being the circular economy officer for IBEC, so she's working between ourselves and IBEC. There's going to be a survey of chief executives launched very shortly, it should be next week, and it's going to do things like asking people about, are you aware of the circular economy? We'll give them some practices, have you done any of these? And ask people to look forward. So I don't want to go into the whole detail of it because it hasn't actually launched yet, but it'll be an interesting piece just to look at, so these are the business leaders of Ireland, and have they started to think about circular economy? So it will be interesting to see that go out. Anne is looking at the financial supports around the circular economy. So, we were talking the other day and I was saying, I hear these phrases about, should the EU put billions into the circular economy? Again, what does that mean if you're in Longford and you're trying to expand a factory? Does that phrase deliver anything to you? Is there any support that you can get either from the EU or trickling down to Ireland? And Anna's in the middle of working through all of that, from European Investment Bank to Horizon 2020 to Enterprise Ireland supports and all of these things. And the last piece, which again is that I was looking at these papers in Northern Ireland and such like, trying to say how many jobs are in there. So Anna and the team in IBEC are looking at producing something similar for the Republic of Ireland to be able to say, well, these are the kind of jobs we really expect to see in industry coming through if this circular economy thing is adopted and adopted well. So that kind of work is pretty interesting and important, and for us I suppose it's just all on this kind of trying to make it real, trying to find something in the circular economy and make it happen. So I was just going to end on two slides. This was just three questions. Will the circular economy make a difference in Ireland? So they're all sort of pushing around the same point, I guess. What will be different? So what's going to happen, and again, it just cannot be a response to legislation. But this circular thing, it launched, it took a little bumpy passage into life, but it's certainly there now. It's happening, it's getting updated. Is anything changing in Ireland? Will anything change in Ireland? Or is it simply a series of press releases that come out from Brussels? And that's, I suppose, the challenge and what I'm suggesting we need to think about. Could it pass us by? Or the other way I could have asked that question was, will we know what's happening? Will EU move on to something different in 5 years' time, and the circular economy will have sort of tapered off, and we'll be like, oh, does that even happen in Ireland? So I think that's just important for us to start thinking about. It's going to come out of the people in this room. So these are some of the things that, and again, I'm really just trying to prompt discussion as much as anything else, that maybe we need to do in the future, in the near future, in the very near future maybe. Innovation came up, I think it was Jean, you mentioned innovation. So innovation supports, they need to come out of the EPA, Enterprise Ireland, they need to come down from European funding bodies like the Horizon 2020 programme. Good examples, a bit about, recognising, the likes of that Memergy example is really, really interesting. So to kind of inspire people and say, look, the circular economy will give you a business opportunity. There is something there. Maybe these waste targets will generate more brown bin waste, and therefore you can start doing something. So it's trying to find out good examples, case studies. They might be in Ireland, they might be overseas, and see something. Oh, you can do that in Sweden. Maybe you can do that in Ireland. I think that bit's going to be important. this public demand piece, you know, I'm a member of the public, and supposing I want to be more circular, what can I do? Is there some role I have in the circular economy? Am I simply a taker of what business does, or is there some way? And I think that came up earlier as well, about how we're able to get on board with this and start driving changes and look for changes, and to think about in ourselves, to think about, if I want to be circular, what do I need to do? Is there some way I can live a little bit differently that would embrace the principles of this thing? Because I think it's good. I'm sitting here today, and I think businesses should go off and be more circular. Maybe I need to be more circular. And in doing that, that will generate the demand that a business will respond to. So I think there's something for us to do as members of the public to think about this thing. And the last piece is just this bit about, you know, to engage beyond the environment, you know, and I don't know exactly who's here, but chances are we're mostly sort of greenish. And it's trying to get beyond that point. And again, I know IBEC have their CEO conferences next week, I think, Anne, isn't it? And it has 4 sort of individual sections, and one of those is on the circular economy. So that's interesting. You know, there's central mainstream business Ireland starting to think about the circular economy. That's a really heartening thing. But you know, in everything we're doing, we're trying to get this out from its economy. Maybe it's about society, it's how we live. So it's just, I think if we're going to be successful in this thing, it's going to need to just spread out a little bit more. So I suppose at those 4 points, I might just leave it at that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shane. I think it was great that you started off just reflecting where we are as a physical embodiment, really, of what you can do for a circular economy, and the 3D living textbook that I think Sarah coined at the initial phase for the Wiser Life project. So I'd just like to ask if the speakers from the last 3 could come to the front. We have a chance to have some Q&A. So Aideen, sorry, dragging you up there from the back, and Joanne, it was whoever was going to answer the questions.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, if you'd just like to come up here, that's great. So I suppose while we're just waiting, if you're thinking about your questions, Shane, it was interesting to say about the what kinds of supports might be provided, and you mentioned the EPA. Is there any plans to have a specifically targeted circular economy support stream through EPA funding, or is this going to be sort of embodied in all the funding streams for EPA in the future?
It's very, very high on my to-do list. Over the years, we've had what used to be the Cleaner, Greener Production Programme, which became the Green Enterprise Programme. And the instruction for this year from our new Director, Emer, is that it's to be a circular economy programme. So I am on a train up and down to Cork on Tuesday, and I'll be spending all of that journey writing a circular economy call. So we will be out with something probably in the next month, 6 weeks, which will offer funding directly to circular economy. Now, over the recent years, we've been pushing the Green Enterprise Programme into that direction. We've got, I think it's 95% is the funding rate for social enterprises, so that was an attempt to try and allow people like that to come in. The rest, normally we funded 75% for this programme, so this was an attempt to try and recognise that some people need even more support than established businesses. So, and the topics of over the last couple of years have moved into that circular economy space, but it'll be explicit and upfront this year.
Yeah. That's interesting. I just wondered, because you mentioned obviously the other organisations like Enterprise Ireland. I mean, is there a space where funders can come together to maybe make better use of how those funds are distributed? I mean, you mentioned the idea of going beyond the environment, so things like ageing, nutrition, health, all of these things are also potentially part of a future circular economy.
It's absolutely the right idea. We're doing it on a kind of a one at a time basis at the moment. So we were out with Enterprise Ireland about a month ago and met with them, and it was interesting just to get their take on what the circular economy meant to them. And it's not as high on their radar as it is on ours. So that was good for us to kind of hear, okay. And we, Science Foundation Ireland is the next group that we're going to be. So we're kind of bouncing around between people to try and start building this. But you're right, it's probably interesting if we could all sit in the room at one time and throw things at each other. So
That's great, thank you. So do we have any questions from the floor for our speakers? So we have a couple here. So I'll take maybe the one at the back and then the next person. Sorry, okay.
I just was wondering in relation to waste management. I find it I suppose it's a lot of what we've been talking about, the consumer and the consumer's ability to live a sustainable life, because that's what I find hard to do. It's not the easiest way. So I suppose my question is, what is the sort of communication and between the producers and the waste management sector in terms of when I go and buy my groceries in the shop, I get annoyed every time because of all the single-use plastics. But there's not a lot. Okay, I can go to a different shop, I can bring my own bag, and there is alternatives. But I think for mainstream consumers, there isn't a lot of options to kind of everyday sustainable life. It is a bit trickier. So I'm just wondering, I'm not saying there is a solution. I know it's complex, but is there a communication? I assume there is a communication between waste management and the big multinational companies that makes a lot of money and still use all this plastic. And yeah, that's
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess the question there is around it's hard to live a sustainable circular life. We're asking consumers a lot of the time to do labour, work around sorting waste and things like that. So, how do we make it easier, perhaps, for consumers? That was one part of the question. I think the other part was around the communication between producers and waste management. I don't know if that's a question you might be able to answer.
I can talk a little bit about the second one.
Yeah.
You're immediately thinking of Kermit Frog, who said it wasn't easy being green. But in that communications piece, there is quite a bit of it goes on. So, Repack act as a little bit of a middleman between the producer side of things and the packaging industry and the waste management side of things. They have a prevent and save program. Some of the stuff that's interesting is that if you think of that drip tray that comes under a chicken if you buy them, there used to be kind of a mat in there that soaked up the drips, and now it's kind of honeycombed so that the mat, the plastic basket itself is able to hold a certain amount of liquid, and so the mat is gone. And that was something that they developed together. I think it was Manor Farm Chickens, I think, led on it. So there are bits and pieces happening. The packaging thing's not entirely straightforward because the retailers are paying in as members of Repack, so that in turn that subsidises our green bins and it subsidises the bring centre. So there is something good about the way the system is working at the moment, but I think we all do worry about the packaging side of it. The supermarkets would talk about the benefit that comes if a wrapped cucumber lasts, I think it's 10 days longer than if they just got cucumbers loose in a box. So they would say from a food waste point of view, sometimes packaging is important. And the supermarkets would always come back to the point that they respond to what we want. Now, I find it difficult as an individual to know how can I therefore tell SuperValu I do or I don't want something to come in a cardboard box or a plastic tray. So I think the communications piece is difficult. The Friends of the Irish Environment are having an anti-plastics day, I think it's next week or the week after, and they're encouraging people to leave all their plastic packaging at the supermarket. And the supermarket, I was talking to someone yesterday from Aldi, and she said, they're going to have to see how they react to that. They're not legally obliged to take it back, but equally they can see people are trying to make a point, and they certainly don't want to be, we're their customers, they don't want to be, annoying us. So it's very, very interesting. So there are ways to communicate these messages, but it can be tricky.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just add one thing to that as well? The regional waste management offices are working with some of the larger producers. So on the back of your packaging, there's a URL, I think it's normally recyclenow.com. So they're going to put the URL to Recycling List Ireland so that the packaging in Ireland relates to what can actually go in your recycling bin in this country rather than it be for the UK or somewhere else.
Thanks. There was one next.
My name is Przemek Drusewicz and I'm representing Upcycling Project. I'm actually a startup company working in a circular economy in a way. We're providing the furnitures, fit-outs for the libraries in schools out of the end-of-use materials. And I have a question in relation to the green procurement in the public institutions. It's actually non-existent at the moment, I think. I never came across it. And we kind of struggle when we have a competition from the companies who provide the furnitures, from the suppliers from China, let's say. And the social factor, the environmental factor, sometimes it's not taken into account when the public institutions are looking at the two suppliers who provide the service. Now the question is, would there be any policy in the future, like there is one in a bicycle scheme, let's say? It's very popular right now, and because of the incentives you can get, suddenly people change the cars into the bicycles, and the whole bicycle sector starts picking up. Is there any kind of a policy planned in the future in the same way for the circular economy companies who are providing the services publicly also?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming to you, Ellie.
Yes, we do have a green public procurement policy and we're actively trying to promote it. It's a hard sell, I'll be honest, but we're doing our best with it. We have an actual policy document and we also have a guidance document that the EPA produced on our behalf, which demonstrates how to put green public procurement into tenders. And we're also involved in one of these Interreg projects at the moment called GPP for Growth. And as part of that project, we're doing a lot of workshops around the country. And we also have a workshop coming here with the participants in October. And we'll probably be showcasing this building here as part of that project because it's to look at good examples of GPP on the ground. So it's also part of the circular economy, but it's a voluntary as opposed to a mandatory requirement. So all I can say to you is yes, it's very much on our radar and we're working in the background trying to promote it, and we do have policy in place.
Yeah.
So,
thank you, Shane.
The other one, just personal view. Local authority government procurement officers have almost been bred to be conservative. You know, their bottom line is to protect the public purse. So that you know, if I was betting on where the big changes in procurement are going to come from, I wouldn't. And I see that green public procurement phrase all the time, and again I see big numbers beside it. But if I was personally going to try and put furniture into somewhere, I would suspect that I would probably stand a better chance getting into a restaurant or a bar than I would into a county council or the Environmental Protection Agency or something like that. I think you have to recognise there's an innate conservatism, whatever that word is, conservatism in the public sector where we're all about trying to make sure we don't waste money. And so therefore you have to be very cautious about the steps you take. And if you want someone to take a leap, I on a personal basis, I would be jumping another direction.
Add to that.
Just to add to that, one of the projects I'm currently looking at the moment is a responsible sourcing project. And to build on what Shane has said, if you're looking to the public sector to kickstart your business or seed your business, it's not the right one because they're risk adverse. So, but where you need to consider is that a lot of the larger corporates, so that even the likes of commercial semi-states like ESB or whatever, they're beginning to look at responsible sourcing. So when they're evaluating products or tenders, or they're evaluating companies, they have a whole set of criteria now that they're mapping against, and they're looking for products and services that meet certain criteria. So I think that's kind of where you should be starting to look at, because waiting for the kind of public sector to kind of take that leap, it is some time off, and I'm saying that based on past experience of being in the public sector and having led workshops on this with the founders of the Greenway who are public sector based, and getting their procurers and the specifiers into a room. And there is a lot of, it's just risk adverse, and there's a mandate there to go and buy something that's the most, say, what's the word, meat, the most, that's the word, that's the phrase. And they're trying to balance that against maybe a specifier who wants something that's future-proofed. And in between, you're adding something into the mix that's different, that doesn't generally fit into the criteria. But if you're talking to larger corporates or commercial semi-states, they have an eye on this now, because for a lot of them, their investors are asking it of them. So you need to consider that.
Thank you. Yep. Sorry, it was just back and then.
Yeah, it was more comments really rather than questions. Well, firstly to thank Sarah and the team here, and just to say that the department is the national contact point for the LIFE programme, so we're actually behind this building here, and have encouraged them as they went along. We've also brought I've brought some flyers here just to encourage people, maybe if they're thinking of a project, LIFE is a possibility, and circular economy is very much on the LIFE agenda, and I think there's people here from the Commission you can talk to as well. We're certainly pushing the close-to-market projects at the moment, and my colleague Pat Martin is the person to get in touch with. Just on a few comments in terms of what I've heard this morning. I agree, in terms of, I suppose, pushing this agenda, I think it is very important that business gets involved. From my experience on other, building on what Jim was talking about on the Paris Agreement, business very much likes certainty, which often means they actually like regulation, and once the regulation is in place and they know what has to be done, then they usually start trying to get behind it. And in addition, I think, to the legislative side of it that will obviously drive a lot of change, there is an action plan involved in the circular economy, and it has over 50 actions between the Commission and various players. So I think that one in particular is probably going to bring about more change maybe than the legislation. And also recently, as part of the implementation of this action plan, the Commission launched the plastic strategy. And an interesting component to that actually is a pledge that they're looking at industry to take. And the whole idea of that pledge, as I understand it anyway, is to sort of encourage the use of recycled plastics in the value chain, and sort of get the different players along the chain to actually pledge to want to use the recycled components. So that's all about creating a market and trying to close the loop. Also in terms of research, there is EPA research calls are going to come out shortly, and there's a sustainability call there, and a number of those projects would tie in to the circular economy. Apart from the fact that we will have several waste directives to transpose in the next 2 years, I think there will be some initiatives coming at our end, but we're still sort of waiting to see what they are. But there's been a lot of talk, as you know, about a latte levy. There is going to be something from the Commission on single use. So I think it is watch this space, and hopefully something will be happening this year.
Thank you very much for that update. It's really helpful.
One more here and then up.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi there, Gráinne Kelleher from Airfield Estate in Dundrum. One question. Having an eye on what's happening internationally in terms of the circular economy and the emerging businesses that are coming from that, what would you see as possible business opportunities for Ireland, and what are the gaps, I suppose?
Okay, yeah. Aideen, maybe you get to see lots of ideas. Do you have any sense of where there's business opportunities really waiting to be reaped here?
You know, I guess it's very hard to say, well, what is the one good idea? But if you look to the Climate Launchpad programme that we are part of and we deliver in Ireland, the mandate behind that programme, it's about ideas that have a big impact. So I guess what we're beginning to see are companies and are more entrepreneurs who are looking at, well, what are the industries that have the largest challenges? So like the fashion industry, which is one example. So we're beginning to see a lot of startups emerge in that space with business models and approaches that address the fashion industry. So there is no kind of answer that I can say to you. There is an absolute sweet spot of a business, because it is about your personal knowledge of an area and of a topic, and then it's about working with somebody who will just help you get the right business model. But certainly, when you look at anything that has a climate-aligned or circular economy purpose, you are beginning to see growth areas. And if you even look at the companies that I mentioned, so Hexafly, which is in the aquaculture industry, that's a bioeconomy type company. If you look at Mimergy, that could be described as a circular economy type company. So we can put as many names as we want in all of these things, but they through their own personal experience, have just hit on a spot that they go, there is a niche here, and I can kind of do something with that. But certainly, if we're looking at the bigger picture, we're seeing a lot more come through on the, if we're looking at the kind of the more general term of circular economy, certainly on the fashion industry, we're seeing a lot more.
Okay, thanks. Shane?
Yeah, I was just trying to jot down a few. It's great to be the second answer because then you can. It's hard to ignore the food and drink sector in Ireland. If you were looking for an opportunity in any kind of economic opportunity in Ireland, it's there. It's local. The ownership will either be yourself or to be a national company. So that has to be a good starting point. And maybe something local supply chain stuff like that. Technology is obviously something that came out. And even Aideen was just talking about it there. So if Irish entrepreneurs feel that they're strong in technology, there must be endless opportunities in being able to use technology to deliver services rather than products and such like. There must be things in the plastics, packaging, waste area. So if we're going to see the circular economy is going to start capturing more of these things, and recycling is going to be brought in as if legislation is going to facilitate all of these sort of things, why not look at those material streams and see what you can do with them? And the last one that sprung to my mind was around recognising that there's quite a lot of multinational corporations in Ireland. They're coming with pretty big CSR agendas, so they're coming from headquarters to do the right thing, and there has to be opportunities in there to be either providing services or innovative products into multinationals to try and see how to act into their headquarters-led corporate demand, if you like.
Thanks.
Okay,
thank you.
Businesses that might have behavioural change, I suppose.
Yeah.
Just to add one thing to it, it is about, if you're developing any product or any business, it's about, well, what's the customer willing to pay for? So, we've had and have seen all these great ideas come forward, but if you don't have somebody at the end point as a customer, then that's all the role will remain to be, is a good idea. So the sweet spot is getting your idea, but understanding your business model and understanding your customer, or your beachhead, or as we call it, your beachhead market. And that's no mean feat to get all of those three things together. So, many good entrepreneurs will have 10 to 20 to 30 to 50 ideas milling around in their head at any one time, and they just happen to pick on one that they get a little bit of help to work on and develop.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Olin Hair Limited, and I just wanted to make a comment to Shane and maybe perhaps a question. One of the resources that's been talked about that is finite, that is irreplaceable, is phosphorus. And there's a lot of talk that the phosphorus resources of the planet could be hitting problems over the coming decades. There could be volatility in the price of phosphorus rock for fertiliser, which could have all kinds of impacts on food prices and in the long term food security. And one of the challenges has been how to recover phosphorus from wastewater without the problems of toxic metals and without the problems of ingested pharmaceuticals. And one of the projects here, which I'm very pleased that we got support from Sarah and the Rediscovery Centre here, was for a phosphorus recovery and recycling facility that I have just out here in the hallway here. And it uses the idea of source separated urine and hydroponically growing plants with the urine, and then composting the harvested plants in order to remove the ingested pharmaceuticals. So my question is, once the trials on this have been completed and the academic analysis has been finished and there's proper papers written up to show the thing has been properly working, could I ask the EPA to reconsider source separation as one of the approved methods of wastewater treatment for domestic houses? I understand that the EPA have already done research under Strive to look at phosphorus recovery from municipal wastewater treatment systems, but nothing has been done to date with regard to all the numbers of septic tanks around the country at the moment, which are discharging large amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus into the ground, which then can no longer be recovered, as a phosphorus or a nitrogen fertilizer to grow food. And my concern is that even if we succeed in recovering phosphorus from municipal wastewater treatment systems, if there's still a very large percentage of the population of Ireland living in rural areas where there's no technology that is appropriate for family situations to recover phosphorus safely without toxic metals and without pharmaceuticals, that there could be a shortfall in phosphorus And like the housing crisis, if there's a shortfall in a resource that people want to buy, and more people want to buy it, the price goes up. So rather than waiting until the crisis is upon us, and rather than waiting until the economics justify the business model, there's an argument for saying that there's, in my view, a need for regulation from the top down to permit niche developments in some of this sort of stuff, even before there's a business case to be answered.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Shane, could you?
Yeah, no, thanks, Olin. It's interesting. I'd like to think the EPA responds to things like this, and that, we do put guidance out on domestic wastewater treatment plants. So I would agree with you. I think, yes, we should have that conversation. And as you said all of it correctly. It all has to be proven and all of that. So yeah, you said all of it. So yeah, when we're at that point, yeah, you're dead right. The EPA should look at this, and yeah, if it's the right thing to do, it should be in our guidance here. So yeah, let's get a conversation going.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to make a point about the green procurement. If you don't mind going back to that.
Yes, sorry.
So just to give you our experience on this building, it was actually quite difficult to specify what we want. I mean, it was quite difficult to find what we wanted in the first place. But then to specify that and to procure it was a considerable challenge, mainly because the legs and arms of government are working against each other. And while they have one instinct to support the circular economy and reuse and recycle and all that kind of stuff, there's much more other painful things like just general procurement and certification of the building and all that kind of stuff, which trumps all of that in many cases. It's quite complicated, and I think the answer is that the products that we supply as part of the circular economy just has to be better and cheaper. It has to come back to the quality of the thing. You can't rely on it on being good for the environment, although that's obviously critical as well.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a couple of more questions, and then we might take a 5-minute kind of comfort break before we move on to the second session. So we'll take these last two.
Helen McNamara, Dublin City Council, and just in relation to what Dara has just said there on green procurement, it was the City Council, which is the local authority, which is actually responsible for the building here. It's the City Council building. It was the City Council who did the procurement. So we actually did use the green procurement, and we did successfully do it. And I suppose, whilst there is risk adverse, I think maybe we should use this as an example for other local authorities and other projects that it can be done. And also, I think a lot of our other policies are very much sustainable-led. So we have our regional waste management plans. Our development plans are very sustainable in many aspects. And I think at a local level, the teams in our local authorities work very closely with community groups and with the general citizens to provide sustainable projects and fund sustainable projects. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Martina. I work with ECOS Environmental Consultants, and I suppose coming back to the point, is circular economy going to be good for Ireland? I 100% agree with that, and I can see that is where we will all be at in time to come. However, there's some major challenges which we have certainly come across with a number of our own clients. The single biggest one that jumps out to me would be achieving end of waste status, or secondary raw materials. There's no clear answers on this at the moment, I suppose, so I'm not looking for them. But if you could offer maybe your thoughts on this, are there any plans to streamline this process and make it a bit more achievable? Because I know certainly within the last 12 months we've had about 3 companies who are looking at opportunities in this. There will be employment generated, but this major block is here in terms of the time, like you're talking maybe, well, actually there is no real time. Anything over 18 months, to achieve this end of waste thing, which just seems to be, I don't know, there's no real answers at the moment. Just get your thoughts on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not an easy one. Yeah, I've heard that before, and I know the guys in Wexford who are dealing with them, and they're looking at end of waste and byproduct declarations, and some of it's quite tricky. The stuff on soil and stones, they're being hammered with, series and series of applications from people who are planning to make a lot of money out of doing something and possibly not doing it with the best of intentions. So they're dealing with an awful lot of paperwork that they have to go through very carefully, because it's all going to get backed up with a lot of money and a lot of court cases and things. That's made what seems like a very simple idea, that surely you can just look at this thing and make a declaration. It's made it extremely complicated and really, really slow to get moving. We're conscious of it in the organisation. It comes up that it's not helping the circular economy. It's not helping the sort of things I was talking about, that these things aren't happening. But the team are really, really struggling to be able to make these declarations with all the facts. Sometimes they're not given full information with the applications, and it's really, I'd say from their point of view, they would come back and say, like, Jesus, no one's coming to meet us halfway on this one. Whereas I'm sure from your client's point of view, they're kind of saying, well, the EPA are moving nowhere on this one. It's an unhappy space at the moment, is about the best I can say. We're aware of it, and I don't immediately see solutions to it. There's just, the backlog is huge, and as I say, we just keep getting so much paperwork thrown at us. I can't remember how many thousands of pages they were saying that they're dealing with every year or every month, or whatever it was. It was eye-opening, eye-popping nearly, what they talked about.
Thanks, Shane. I was going to give you all a 5-minute break, but I think my watch is a little bit slow. What time is it actually now? Okay, yeah, it's fine. We can take 5 minutes, I think, now. Jean, if you wanted to ask a question, it's quick.
Oh, yeah. No, it's just 2 things. One is just to find out whether there's any anecdotal evidence that the green bin sorting has got improved, whether you're hearing anything back since we had all the leaflets and everything. I know I, for one, was putting soft plastic in and was gutted to find that it wasn't wanted and it never had been, and I felt so guilty. That was one. And secondly, just to say, I didn't really name our report, but moving towards the circular economy in Ireland, it's on the NEST website, and it does go through some of the policy measures other countries have taken to kind of signal the intention where circular economy is a key policy priority, and how that's done. There are other countries like Scotland and Finland who are doing that, and it's just, there are mechanisms and clear, concrete, tangible ways, such as the investment fund, but others that we could learn from and hopefully adopt in time.
Thank you.
Very simply, yes, there has been an improvement, but I don't have any statistics or anything on it at the moment.